Hey Panthers, how are you? It's getting warm outside, isn't it? So I hope you guys are finding some things to do to stay inside and stay cool because this week is going to be a hot one. So for this week's Read Aloud, I was thinking about what are some things that we all like to do when it is hot outside. And I don't know about you, but I know my kids personally love to play with super soakers. And so I started thinking about the super soakers and I never knew this. This is how the super soaker was invented. It was invented by Lonnie Johnson. And so there's actually a book about him, and I thought it would be fun in honor of the heat this week to learn more about this inventor and how he ended up coming up with this discovery of the super soaker. So this book is written by Chris Barton, illustrated by Don Tate, and it's called Whoosh, Lonnie Johnson's Super Soaking Stream of Inventions. All right, so let's see. Remember, we can learn more about things on the blurb, which sometimes happens on the back. This one gives a little quote. It says, "I wanted to be an engineer before I knew what an engineer was. I was always curious to know how things worked inside." And I know so many of you Panthers are also like this. You love building things and inventing things. And summertime is a good time to do it because you've got some extra time right now to be working on that. So we're going to learn a little bit more about Lonnie Johnson. And it says Lonnie Johnson was always building things. As a kid, he made rockets. As a teenager, he built a robot from scratch. As an adult, he worked for NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory on the Galileo orbiter and probe that studied Jupiter. And then one day, while hooking up his latest invention to the bathroom sink to test it out, whoosh, water shot across the room. This would make a great water gun, Lonnie thought. Meet the innovative engineer who unexpectedly invented one of the most popular toys of all time, the Super Soaker. Here we go. Every day brought a challenge for young Lonnie Johnson, the challenge of finding space for his stuff. 6 Johnson kids were squeezed into their parents' small house in Mobile, Alabama. Lonnie would have loved a workshop of his own, but there just wasn't room. There was nowhere to keep his rocket kits. Bamboo shooters, rubber band guns, erector set, go-kart engine, bolts and screws and other spare parts his dad let him bring in from the shed, and various other things he'd hauled back from the junkyard. Lonnie loved building and creating. Ideas for inventions just kept on flowing. He learned how to make rockets from scratch. Kids at school gathered to watch Lonnie launch them, and he learned how to make rocket fuel. When it caught fire in the kitchen, Lonnie's mom didn't make him stop. She just sent him to work outside. Lonnie wanted to spend his life designing things, building things, and getting them to work. He wanted to be an engineer. However, Lonnie took an exam that said he would not make a very good one. His dream had been challenged. Lonnie was discouraged. But he knew that whoever had graded his test hadn't met Linux. Remember this year we talked a lot about growth mindset and about the ability that even though sometimes things are hard, that actually means that our brain is working even better, right? That's when we're learning. The learning is really in the struggle. And so do we let things like one test or one person's idea tell us what it is that we're meant to do or what we're capable of? No. And so he had a great growth mindset, didn't he? He decided, they haven't met me. They don't know me. One test can't determine anything about me. And so, inspired by a TV show, Lonnie had built his own robot. He made it out of scrap metal and he named it Linux. Compressed air cylinders and valves allowed Linux's body to turn and its arms to move. The switches came from an old broken jukebox. Lonnie used a tape recorder to program Linux, and as a bonus, the reels looked like eyes. Lonnie wanted to enter his creation in a science fair, but he couldn't get the transmitter to work. Without it, Lonnie couldn't send commands to Linux. Science fairs came and went. Lonnie missed one and then another until he got an idea. Now, Lonnie may or may not have asked before he borrowed his little sister's walkie-talkie. But it fixed the transmission issue. His school's team took freshly finished Linux to a 1968 science fair at the University of Alabama, where only 5 years earlier, African American students hadn't even been allowed. Having to compete in a place that still wasn't very welcoming, now that was a challenge with a capital C. Against other schools from all over the state, Lonnie's team won first place. Soon, Lonnie left home to go to college at Tuskegee Institute, where he stood out as a self-confident, insightful, creative thinker. He stood out as a student who asked the right questions, precisely defined problems, and formulated solutions. And he stood out as the guy who built his own booming sound system out of cast-off electronics. It even had lights that flashed in sync with the beat. Lonnie sometimes studied right in the middle of his own parties. The extra studying paid off. He became an engineer after graduation, and that took him beyond Alabama, way beyond. So had he have listened to that one test that said you're not capable of being an engineer, this isn't a good thing for you, would he have ever been able to do any of this? No. He set his mind towards his goal and he worked hard to achieve it. When NASA was sending an orbiter and probe called Galileo to Jupiter, the space agency needed to ensure a constant supply of power to the orbiter's computer memory. The engineer who had to figure out how to do it was Lonnie. His challenge was to come up with a lightweight backup system able to keep essential functions going in case the main power was lost. It wasn't easy, it wasn't obvious, but Lonnie found a solution. Some at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory doubted his idea would work. Lonnie convinced them it would. He was right. As it photographed Jupiter and its moons, Galileo was supported by the power package that Lonnie designed. Much of what we know about Jupiter could have been at risk in a power failure, if not for Lonnie. And look at all the stuff that he did. He had a low gain antenna, sun shields, thrusters, a probe relay antenna, scan platforms, retro propulsion module, plasma wave antenna, and that's the Jupiter probe. Ideas for other problems to solve just kept on flowing. They flowed whether Lonnie was working with hundreds of people at NASA or up late tinkering with his own inventions in, finally, his own workshop. Lonnie knew the world's millions of refrigerators and air conditioners needed a new cooling system, one that didn't use R12, a chemical that was bad for the environment. He had an idea for using water and air pressure instead. To test his idea, he made a pump and nozzle, connected them to the bathroom faucet, turned on the faucet, turned on the pump, and then, what do you think happened? Whoosh! The stream that blasted across the bathroom was so powerful it created a curtain-swirling breeze. It also gave Lonnie an idea for yet another invention. This, he thought, would make a great water gun. First, he had to find or make the parts, including a pump small enough for a child to handle. Then he had to glue the parts together into a prototype, which is an early version of an invention with room for improvement. Finally, Lonnie tested his strange-looking squirt gun at a picnic. "Does it really work?" a man asked. "Sure," Lonnie said. "Want to see?" Lonnie worked the pump, which squeezed air into a chamber. When he pulled the trigger, the air escaped, forcing water out with a whoosh. For a water battle to be a fair fight, there couldn't be just one of Lonnie's water guns. He needed help making more. So he went to a toy company. After another toy company and another, the word no flowed again and again. But finally, one company said yes. It planned to make his water gun. Lonnie also had other projects: a water-propelled toy airplane, 2 kinds of engines, and his cooling system. He found investors to provide the money for turning his ideas into products people could buy. He made a leap of faith, quit his day job, and devoted himself to full-time inventing. But soon each plan fell apart, even the one for the water gun. These things sometimes happen, but when they happen one after another to the same person, well, that's some pretty bad luck. Lonnie didn't have a job. He didn't have the money he'd been counting on. He and his family had to move out of their home and into a tiny little apartment. He was angry and scared. But Lonnie had dealt with challenges all his life. He knew a lot about solving problems, and he still believed in his inventions, especially the water gun. Lonnie went looking for another toy company. In 1989, he found a toy maker who was interested in seeing the water gun if Lonnie ever happened to be in Philadelphia. But don't make a special trip, the guy said. Lonnie made a special trip. In his wife's suitcase, he carried a new prototype. He unpacked it, filled the tank with water, pumped the gun until the air pressure was good and high, and whoosh! Wow, look at that. And it says, whoosh. Kids everywhere agreed that, wow, Lonnie's water gun, called the Super Soaker, became a smash hit. In no time, there were super soakers in backyards and on beaches and parks and on playgrounds. Each sale of a super soaker put a little money into Lonnie's pocket. All those hours, all those years that Lonnie spent in his workshop had paid off big time. Now he could afford to do just about anything that he wanted. So what did Lonnie do? He got a bigger workshop, which is where you'll find him today. Because facing challenges, solving problems, and building things are what Lonnie Johnson loves to do. And his ideas just keep on flowing. All right, and then this gives you a little more background. And it says that this is an author's note. And this author wants to make sure that this also encourages you. Because he said what was most appealing to me about Lonnie Johnson's story was the fact that it's still unfolding. He didn't just take his super soaker money and retire young. Instead, he directed it towards hands-on efforts to solve one of the most important engineering puzzles of our day. His mission? To efficiently harness heat energy from the sun and other sources in order to generate the electricity we need without polluting the planet. I loved talking with Lonnie Johnson for this book. I've never laughed as hard during an interview as I did when we discussed his work on Linux and how his family put up with his efforts, or rather, how they encouraged him. It's no surprise that today, even as he continues his own work, Lonnie Johnson makes time to encourage the efforts of tomorrow's scientists and engineers. I hope this book will encourage them too. And that's you guys, because you all are capable of being scientists and engineers, right? And so I hope this book inspired you and also helped give you some cool thoughts as we head into this heat this week, all right? So have fun, and I will see you guys again next week with another book.